Okay, so session variable. Sometimes you've got a variable that you want to store for the entire PHP session.
Yeah.
You want it shared across all pages in the program without having to pass it around with the post.
Yes, please. How do we do this?
I didn't learn about this all day long.
Yeah.
One at a time.
We put up only one thing a day.
Well, anyways, that's called session variables. You can also use cookies, but a cookie is stored on the user's computer, like it's a file. A session is just stored in memory on the server, and then whenever the session is done, those variables get wiped out. Anyway, so if you want to use a session variable, you're going to use a session array, which is like the post array, but it's called session instead of post. To do this, the first thing you have to do, the very first line on the page must be session start. So we're going to open PHP up here, PHP, and we'll call session_start. Close it with a semicolon, and then you can close PHP to start your HTML stuff if you so desire. But this has to come first.
Does it have to go on the first one, or can it be like anywhere before the session variable?
You said it has to come first. It's the very first. Up at the top.
This is why it's
No, that's a good question. I'm sorry. And now we can use the session variables. This has to be at the top of every page that you want to access the session variables. So if I add more pages, this has to come first, very first. What else? Now we can, it's an array, it's just like the post array. So it starts with a $sign and an underscore and then capitals, all capitals. If you write this in lowercase, it will just create a session array in lowercase for you, but it will not be the session array. And you will try to access it later on, and it won't work. So inside the session array, you can add whatever element you want. So we could say name, or name. Blow that up a little bit. And then put a name in here. And now I will, let's just say I have a form here. This is some HTML stuff. Not type, what am I looking for here? Method. Method equals post, and action equals display.php. And we can put in a submit button. Just to make it quick. And now let's add a new PHP file. We'll call it display. And on here we can just get rid of the comments and just echo something out. Echo name dot, and then we'll access our session, all caps, name. Well, that needs to be in quotes. Dot .br. Now what have I done wrong?
You gotta close the PHP.
You actually don't have to
Yeah,
close.
you actually do not have to.
Wait,
It
you don't?
suggests we don't.
It suggests you don't.
We have to do session start. Session start has to be first.
Oh, on the display too?
Every file. Alright, let's run this and see if it works. Internet Explorer.
Hey, Internet Explorer.
Gross.
Oh, sorry, it's Edge now. It's Microsoft.
No, they're both there. Anyway, so we've got our submit button. We should click that, and we see the name Fred. So it does work. It carries over, and that will stay there until you delete it or overwrite it. So you don't have to carry things over and over again through post.
How do you get it to not say submit word?
Value equals submit.
Or start?
Yeah, I did
What
this.
is the value?
I did this quick and dirty, but we can do value equals submit. So you can put any kind of variable you want in the session array. Here's another example. We could say session, and you can also use single quotes. I'll do that just to make it confusing. Names equals, let's say I want to put an array in here. So I've got a two-dimensional array, right? Because session is an array, and now I've made one of the elements an array, so that's a two-dimensional array, an array inside of an array. And I can say session names, and the first element of my array, I can use a 0 and say this is equal to Marty, Mary, Fred. We already got Fred. Now, he's in a different spot though. He's not in this array. But I could do that, or I could use the general push session names. Oh, wait, that's not right. We have to call the function first. Array underscore push, and then I'll push to my array. So this effectively becomes element 1, and then we can put in Joey. Does everyone understand this? We're treating this as an array, even though it's inside of an array itself. So you can think of it as a 2D array like this, or you can think of it as an array inside of an array, which is effectively the same thing. And all of these guys will be available on any other page in our project.
Unless we don't start the session.
Unless we don't start the session. So let's go to display and make sure this works. We can do, let's do for each. For each, what's my array?
Names.
No.
Session.
Session. Session names.
That's what I meant, right?
I know that's what. As in. And then we could echo echo. Echo. Well, we'll just echo that in. So we should see Fred, and then we should see Marty and Joey.
It's not liking.
Don't get hates that.
Yeah, it hates it. Can I see?
Oh, that works on mine.
Can I see what the display is? See what I'm messing with? My brackets.
Oh, that works.
We are, right? Look how nice and flat. If I could figure out how to type in PHP, right? Yeah, right.
Just don't forget this guy up here at the top let me verify that. Let's just comment this out. I'm gonna kill whatever's running down here, and we'll fire this thing up again and see what kind of output we get. Hello? Hello? It, yeah, we get the undefined variable, blah, blah, blah. So that session start is critical. Yeah. And then you can you can destroy a session if you want to. There's session, like IntelliSense is going to show you a whole bunch of stuff here, but destroy will end the session. If you don't want to destroy everything, maybe you just want to clear it out. If you want to like reset all of the variables you have in there, because it can get kind of messy because it's kind of like just a global array of everything. You can do a session underscore unset. Sorry, yes, unset. And this clears all variables. And so there's the crash course in session arrays. What next? What are we gonna do? We'll do classes?
Oh, that's for next week.
No? No.
We do functions.
What?
Functions.
We'll do both. We'll do classes and we'll do member functions. So you do new, I think you do PHP file. I'm going to do PHP class though. New PHP class. Let's do employee. We're just embracing the object-oriented nature of programming. If you wanted to use your session array here, you would include that at the top. If not, just scrap all of these comments. It says put your code here. Zoom in. And this is just like any class that you would use in Java or C++ or any other object-oriented language. You're thinking of an object, and this object has different properties, and you want to kind of wrap them all up in one little template called a class. And so here's how we'll do this. Your variables can have public or private status, so we'll say name. You got to use the $sign, don't forget that. But we'll have a public name, we'll have a private password, or whatever. Let's say we'll have gross pay.
You said gross mistake.
Gross pay. Total pay. If you want to get carried away with this, we would do net pay and hours worked and all that good stuff. But
Aren't your private variables supposed to be not use a little semicolon, but if you just want to do them individually, other than that.
well, this requires
like-
this is PHP. You can't do like the public colon and
A
the,
public colon that
I'm
just
just
lists a
like-
bunch of variables, so they'd all be private.
Coding standard, isn't it private variables are on the top and public is below that, or is it the other way?
I don't know. I don't know. It depends on who you're working for.
Yeah.
Some stuff I've seen where they'll go back and forth. I think the general standard is all variables are private, unless there's a very special reason why it shouldn't be. But normally all of this would be private. That's the standard, and then your functions are public, and you have to go through a function to access any variable. That's the general standard, but if you're a rebel, you can do it any way you want to.
And then, for
It depends on what kind of programming you're doing.
Like in a game, most of your stuff are public, because everything has to see like about, or not everything, but like health and damage and stuff like
In a game, you can do it either way.
that. I guess you can't
Just
If you optimize, like in C++, if you optimize all of your getters and setters are going to be inline anyways, it's going to basically throw them out. So the public and private is only for the programmer. Some people say it helps with finding bugs. If everything has to go through an accessor, then if you're having an issue with a certain variable, you know it has to be at one of those accessors. I don't think that's a very strong argument. Like the only place I've seen where it's probably beneficial is if you're writing code as a library, like a DLL, and you want to share that with other programmers, and you don't want to give them the code, so it's in DLL compiled form, but you want them to be able to use the variables in your program to some extent, then you would make private variables, and you would only give them setters, or you would only give them getters, or something like that. I don't know, it's kind of like the word const. It's like, why do you need the word const?
So is it stand?
Who's going to try to change the value of pi?
That stands for constant page.
It's for the programmer only. In a large group of programmers, it might be beneficial to make some things constant so that they aren't accidentally changed.
Yeah.
And then, you know, if the other programmer did want to go in there, he would have to go remove the word constant, and that should be a red flag to him that he's probably doing something he shouldn't be doing. Or at least he'll have to think about it.
Or maybe he won't think about it at all, he'll just do it.
Maybe. Now, a lot of game programmers take the C approach, whereas if you know basic C, there's no such thing as data encapsulation. And so everything's public, everything's structured, there is no classes. But they will write it in C++ so that you get access to overloaded operators and polymorphism. Because those two things are really nice to have, especially in game programming. And you can't get those in C. So you end up writing kind of a hybrid between C and C++, where everything's public, but you get your overloaded operators for vector math and things like that. You get your polymorphism for state machines and stuff like that. So I've seen that in some books, so I know that's not just me. That's the way I like to do it. Anyways, there's some variables. Let's write a constructor. So if you're going to write a constructor,
Yeah.
you're going to, it's a function in all languages. Constructor is just a function, but this one will have a special name, and it's not the name of the class. It is construct.
You put the two underline? Oh yeah, you do.
I don't like it.
No, I don't like anything about this language.
It's not even
Terrible, this thing works.
Painful to type, I know.
That's pretty ugly too.
It's gonna get worse.
That's worse.
Here's your constructor. You can't overload this thing.
Wait, you can't?
There's no overloading of the constructor. If I remember correctly, and I think it's like this in most scripting languages. Like you can't do it in Python either. There's workarounds that you can write constructor 1 and constructor 2, but they have to be named differently. You cannot straight up overload the constructor. So from here, if you want to access the class variables, member variables, you're going to access everything using this. $sign first, and then the word this, followed by arrow, followed by the name of your variable without the $sign.
I don't like it.
Can we just not do PHP? How does that sound?
The name is default or unnamed, I don't know. Empty.
Do we not know validates?
Well, this is a constructor, so we're just setting it to something. What's the default name? Same thing with password. But the point being, this is your constructor. You're going to write the word function first. You do the double underscore construct. And then whatever you write in here is what will happen when you create an object from this class.
Finally get the hang of the dollar sign. And go switch it up on.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But if you don't put it there, and you have to use this, so if you just say, notice the color change. Name equals, I don't know, something. Well, it didn't color change on me, but it did flag it. Unused in its scope, indicating that this is not that. Okay, you see the highlighting? When I click on this, it recognizes this one. It's like, hey, these are the same thing. But if I click on this one's not highlighted. This is a rebel. It's because it does not see this name as that name. You must use this pointer if you want to access your member variables.
So you can overload variables, but not functions.
Well, I suppose, yeah, if you want to think of it that way. Let's see, we've got our constructor here. Let's do a calculate function. So function calculate, like we're going to calculate pay. And if you can pass things in. So let's pass in the rate and the hours. And then you could set pay. You could say this pay equals, rate times hours, and we won't do overtime for the sake of keeping it simple, but we could do that in here and make this function a little more justified than that single line. If we didn't have this pay, we could just, calculate pay and then return pay. And so you don't put a return type up here because it's a scripting language, but it will return whatever that is. So you could do it that way. If you want to return from a function, you just write return and then return the thing you want to return.
Would that work with just pay, or do you have to use this pay?
Well, I was pretending I didn't have this. So this pay would give you an error. If we didn't have it as a member variable, if we were just calculating some stuff and then returning it, then you make a variable and then you return that thing using return. It's pretty simple, and like the nature of the scripting language, you just tell it what you want it to do, and it figures out the rest of it for you, compared to C.
It's not so bad.
And then we'll write a display function just for the heck of it. Not passing anything in, not returning anything, it's just plain void function. And we can do echo name dot name dot dr. So there's a display function. We've got a nice little class set up here that covers the basics, member functions, member variables, in its own little file. Let's go back. Let's go to display. Now, if we want to use our class, we're going to come up here to the top like you would in most languages, not before session start. But after session start, we'll do include And there's some variables, or some variables. You can do an include once instead of include. That can be useful because if you try to include the same thing twice, it gets angry. But include employee.php. And that basically copies and paste whatever's in here into this code. You can think of it as a direct copy and paste. So if you've got session start here and you have it at the top of your class page, maybe you want to use session variables in your class, you'll get an error because you try to start the session twice. So that at that point you could scrap it from the top of here because it's coming in at the top of your class file. Does that make sense? Just think of this as a copy and paste of whatever is in here. And now, if we want to create an object from this class, we'll give our object a name like E, and we'll say equals new employee. New employee. That gives us an object from the employee class, fires off our constructor, and we can test that out by using the display. So let's do we can do calc, and let's say he works if I do control P, if you do control P and NetBeans, it will show you the variables there. I couldn't remember if I put rate or hours first, but then that will show me I did rate first, so 10.50 an hour, and then how many hours? 40 hours. And then we can display that. E display. So let's run it this way. I'm going to comment out stuff we had before. Comment out those 4 lines. And so I get my default empty, so that shows my constructor works, and then this shows my function works. And then if I wanted to access that public variable, I could do that. I can say E name equals I don't know, bubble. And then you should be able to see that instead of empty. Maybe.
Name's public, right? Yeah.
What am I doing wrong? Why is it angry?
Mine works.
Oh, it works. It works. All right.